I'm Leanne from the Haberdasher Bee, and in this video I'm going to be making the Tea House dress by Sew House 7. I've made this pattern before. I made the top version, but this time I'm going to be making the tea length dress, so this one here, the B. I'm actually making it out of this beautiful deadstock silk that I bought. You can see as I move it, the video is never going to capture it properly, but the light just, every time it reflects a different colour. It's absolutely stunning. As I say, I bought it deadstock as well, so it's saved from going to landfill, which is always nice. As always, I have not been sponsored by either the fabric provider or the pattern designer. I'm making this because I want to, so I'm going to get this all cut out and then we'll get started on making it. So now that I've got all my pieces cut out, the first thing that I need to do is stay stitch. So I've got the back piece here and you just need to stay stitch around this curved edge here. You also need to do that on the back of the dress and the front of the dress, so piece A and piece D. It's around the neckline again, and that just protects this curved edge from rippling and things like that. So in the instructions there are directional arrows to show you which way to stitch to best protect the direction of the fabric. So in the case of this one, you would go that way, like that. So from the outside down to the middle. You do the same with the back of the dress up to the 2 notches, and the same with the front of the dress. You start at the shoulder and go downwards just to the bottom of the neckline. So I'm going to stay stitch this now, and then we'll get on with the next step of making this. Now that we've done our stay stitching, the next job is to do some ease stitching. So this is going to go on the inside of the V on both your yoke and your yoke facing. So you need to remember to do it on both of them. You do this 6mm from the edge, and the goal is to just gently ease this front edge in by roughly 6mm, so it should come sort of about level with this area here, this point of the other side of the yoke. But you don't want it to look visibly gathered. So obviously when you're ease stitching, remember to leave long tails and don't backstitch at the beginning and end, because that's not going to help you in any way. Just gently use those ends to distribute. So it might not look like it's getting shorter, but if you have a look and compare it to the other side, that's a good way of gauging whether the gathering is, or the easing even, is actually working. So you can see that's shorter than the side that I haven't done. So now I'm going to do the other side. And again, you do that to your yoke. What you do to your yoke after you've finished doing your easing as well is you would apply your interfacing to this section of the V here. And that only goes on your yoke facing, which is the side that goes inside your dress. I because I'm working with silk, I can't attach interfacing because any heat will destroy the luster of this fabric. So I'm not going to be doing any interfacing. So our next job, if you're doing version A, B or C, so I'm doing version B, is our ties. There's 2 of these. And this, you can just see, oops, you can just see where I've notched. So this is my notched end, and then this one's my unnotched end. So you want to fold these in half, all the way down, and we're going to start stitching from here, turn here, and go all the way along, but we're not going to stitch these notched ends together. Okay, so we're going to need them to turn this the right way out. So start from here, turn and go all the way along the edge of your ties. I've stitched my tie, and what we actually need to do now is trim these corners off, but I'm also going to trim some of this excess from the seam off. And when we turn it out, we want to make sure we get these points really nice and crisp. And I'm actually going to top stitch as well around my ties, just to give it a nice solid finish. I like top stitching, I think it looks really nice, but it also has a practical purpose in that it means that this part of the tie can't move then. So, especially since I can't press this fabric, I think top stitching makes sense for this dress. Doesn't mean you have to do it, it's a personal choice. There we are. So as I mentioned, I'm going to top stitch my tie, so I'm going to start at the top, go all the way down, turn around and come back, and the reason for that is so that I can hide my start and end points when I sew the ties onto the yoke. With the back box pleat, you want to take the 2 circles, which I've marked here, just a tiny little snip, because I can't. With silk, if you put a needle in it, then it keeps the hole, so I couldn't mark those circles on with a tailor's tack like I might normally do. But I know that my outer snip marks are my notches, so the inner ones are my circles. What you want to do is this time wrong sides together, so with this fabric there isn't really a right or wrong. If there's a clear right or wrong, you want to make sure you get your wrong sides together. Align the 2 circles, so you can see I've got my 2 little marks aligned, and then we're going to stitch down here for just a couple of centimetres, and that'll just create the pleat. Now that we've stitched our pleat in place, we need to open it out, make sure that the stitching is centered, and press it in place. So I can't use an iron, but I'm going to use just the back of my nail just to give it some definition there. There we go. And there's our box pleat. Next, after doing our pleat, we need to attach the two front yokes together. So this is the bottom front yoke, or lower centre, and here's my top. So we're just going to stitch along this edge here. And you need to make sure that you've got right sides together for this as well. So it joins. Then once we've stitched it in place, you will need to press the seam up towards this front yoke piece, because when we attach the facing, that seam is then going to be enclosed in the facing. So you want to make sure that you press it upwards. For now, just make sure that you're stitching this right sides together. So coming back to our back piece, we are now going to attach our back yoke to our back neckline. So you'll want to have right sides together. So choose, in my case I need to choose my right side. I'm going to go for this side as my right side, so I want this side up. And it's a little counterintuitive, but you want to feed it through your sewing machine. You need to do this slowly, but you need to feed it through like so. So as you go round, you're curving the two necklines together, and it doesn't look like it should work, but I promise you it does. So I have sewn my back yoke on, I've trimmed the seam allowance away as well. Now we are sewing the ties to our front yoke. So first of all you need to find your notches. So I've got one there, and then it's just next to my stitch line there. You want your ties so that they're angled downwards. So that aligns there. Oops. Like that. And then this is the back of my tie, and that would be the front of my tie. Once it's all stitched in place. And we're going to sew this with a 10mm seam allowance, because this then forms part of the seam when we're attaching the yoke to the front. Now we're on to our pockets. So if you're using a fabric that you can attach interfacing to, you want to attach your interfacing from this corner here up to this corner here, so that then the strip carries on from this corner all the way up to this corner, so you get this small sliver that isn't interfaced. And what you do with that is, assuming that this is your wrong side and you've got your fabric interfacing here, you fold this over, this piece, so you've got a perfect triangular angle there, and at this other end you have a perfect straight edge, like so, and you fold that over on top of your interfacing. Now, in my case, I can't use an iron on this silk because silk does not take heat very well. It loses all its luster. So there's no interfacing for me, but it also means that I can't press as you would normally press using an iron. So how I'm actually getting around this is there's two ways that you can press without using an iron. The first is using the flat edge of your fingernail. So if I use my actual fingernail instead of my thumb, I can just put it against the fabric carefully and run it along, and that creates a nice sharp edge that you can use. The second way is with your trusty point turner. Now, especially ones that have this sort of arch shape like mine do, because what you can do is angle it flat and then use where the point turner has been sanded to gently run along the edge of your fabric, like so. And again, it creates a nice clean edge, and as you can see, the fabric stays in place as well. So once you've folded that over your interfaced piece, you're actually going to fold over your interfaced piece as well, so that you get a nice flat edge up at this end and another nice flat edge up at this end. So it creates a beautiful diagonal pocket for you then. Now bear in mind that this is the wrong side of your fabric, so this band will be the right side of your fabric coming over. Now, because my fabric is effectively double-sided, it doesn't have a right or a wrong side. I can use whichever I like, which is quite helpful, as long as I've got opposites, which I do. It also means that I have the luxury of saying, well, actually I quite like how that looks with this line over it, and I might make that my front. There we are, so it's pressed. Now, what you would do now is turn this over onto your front side of your fabric and stitch all the way down along where you've just pressed to create the top of your pocket. As I mentioned though, I quite like how it looks this way around, so I have the benefit of being able to keep it this way around if I choose. Once you've stitched that down, and I would only do it once you've stitched it down, you can turn this bottom edge up. So it's actually a rolled hem. So you turn it up at first by 0.5 centimetre or so, and then you turn it up again by another 0.5 centimetre or so. That gets pressed in position, and then this becomes the bottom edge of your pocket. So when you're actually stitching it to the side front, you edge stitch along this bottom edge, and that is what attaches the bottom of the pocket to your side front. These two side pieces that you're going to be stitching to the side front piece are going to be within the seams, but this is the only seam, other than the open pocket, this is the only seam that's going to be visible on the front. So you want to make your edge stitching nice and neat, and you want the rolling of the hem to be nice and neat as well. So do make sure that you take some time getting that the right way round and making it look all nice, because that will be shown. You will be able to see it on the front side of your pocket if it's not neatly rolled and not neatly stitched. For now, let's get stitching the top edge of our pocket. So now we're matching our pocket to our side front here, and we need to match our notches, but which notches do we look for? Well, if you look on the pocket, you've got a notch up here just not too far below your pocket edge. And then on the other side you've got a notch down here just near the bottom. And you can see I actually tacked my bottom in place. And we're matching these to this bottom notch down here matches this lower notch on our side front, so that goes there like that. And then this upper notch matches this notch on this side of your side front. So that should be the only notch from your armhole all the way down, so it should be fairly straightforward to find. And that's your pocket placement right there. Now we are going to attach the front sides to the front yoke and the centre front piece that we've already put together. So we obviously want these right sides together. And do be aware when you're attaching these that you don't attach your ties in the seam. You want to catch obviously where you've attached the ties, but you don't want to sew your ties into this seam. As you're going down this, you want to be really careful to make sure that you get everything right in this, because these curves aren't quite the same. So just like the back piece and the back yoke piece, it's important that you match them up. You'll notice on my back yoke piece that I didn't quite match them up properly, but I need to be careful to do this on this front. So I've got my front all together. I'm just going to clip on the inside of the seam allowance on these curves just so that they sit nice and flat. And if you're using a fabric that can be ironed, this is the point where you can press it as well, once you've clipped the curves of course, so you get a nice, nice finish just along this edge here. Now later on we can edge stitch down this edge as well, which is definitely something I'm going to be doing. Right now you don't need to worry too much about that, because the next step that we have after clipping our curves is actually attaching the front to the back via the shoulders. Now we've stitched our shoulder seams together, so our front piece and our back piece are now all joined, although the sides are still open. The next thing that we need to do is attach the two yoke facings together. So to do this we start with our front yoke facing right side up, and we attach our back yoke facing right side down. And we're just going to stitch across the shoulder sections up here, like so. So then they become one facing piece. yoke facing is now taking shape. This is the right side, we've stitched it all together. You need to press your seams open. So. And then the next thing that we need to do is set our machine to a nice long stitch length, so 4.5 millimeters, and we're going to go just around this outside edge here with an ease stitch. So we don't want to back stitch or anything like that. The point of easing is, like we did down here, we want to move some of this fabric around. So what we're doing with this bottom edge is making it easier for when we put this wrong side up, for when we start to fold this edge over. It will come together a lot easier than it would do, you know, like it does right now, because the easing will allow it to pull in where it needs to around this outside edge. So don't skip this part, because you'll make things much harder for yourself if you do. So now we've done our ease stitching, we just gently ease it in. As you can see, it naturally wants to curl in now, which is exactly what we want. So we actually want to press this around about 13 millimeters in, so it's just shy of the 15 millimeter seam allowance. If you need to, just keep easing, because you don't want any rippling. This needs to sit nicely against your skin. This looks like it should work fine. And this is what your yoke should look like once you have pressed it. Hopefully it'll be a little bit flatter. As I mentioned, I can't press it the normal way with the silk. Now, because the next step I can't really show you very easily on the layout like this, I'm going to try and show you on my mannequin. So we have our facing wrong side up, and we have underneath our dress right side up, so that the two are right sides together. And we're just going to match our seams and this V and get everything in place, because now what we're about to do is sew around this inside edge of the neckline, just around here. And you want to be really careful when you sew at this point here, because it's very easy to make it look bunched. So you want to come in and get a nice clean V shape, and then when you turn it round you can just carefully snip in here, just so that the fabric can move into that V shape properly. So don't be tempted to go down flat and round, because it won't look right. You want to come straight down into a V, straight back up. So I've done a few things since the last bit that I filmed. I have attached my yoke and edge stitched it around the neck. I've also, in order to attach it properly on the inside, I actually slip stitched the yoke to the inside and then I've top stitched along here as well. I have also done this as a way of finishing my seams on the lower yoke piece. So you can see I've done sort of a reverse flat fell and it actually worked quite nicely. So that's how I've seamed this central piece. It's how I did my shoulders as well, actually. So there are a few places where you can see I've had trouble. Up here on the neck, it's pinched in. Around here you can see it has done the same, and that I think is part of the nature of this fabric, unfortunately. So it's not as slippery per se as I thought it would be, but it does tend to stick, I think, to the sewing machine foot, the presser foot, and that's how come I'm getting some of these areas where it's not quite sat properly. There's unfortunately nothing I can really do about that. I can't take a seam ripper to this silk because you'll see every single hole that I've put in it. But in case you're wondering, it's very similar in texture and rigidity to taffeta. You can see how it just sort of stands by itself. Put the light in the right direction. So it's quite a tightly woven silk, and I think that's causing some of the problems. Hopefully you won't be having these sorts of problems yourself with your own fabric. I didn't have these sorts of problems when I made my top, but that was with an entirely different fabric. That was with a very, very loose woven, it was a fabric that I actually bought from Peru. So that had its own issues. Back to the construction of the dress though, you can see to put it on here I've just tied it around the waist, but it's still two separate pieces. So the next job that we have is actually to stitch these side seams together and take it from being a tent to a dress. I've now sewn my side seams and I've finished them, and we are now on to our sleeve cuffs. So the first thing to do with them is to fold them over, and we're going to sew this line, this edge I should say, here. Once you've sewn along the edge of your cuff, you want to open out the seam and press it flat, just like I've done here. So this is going to be hidden inside the cuff, so you don't need to do any more finishing other than that. What you do need to do, though, is you'll notice there's not any notches along one edge of the cuff. This is the edge that you want to turn up by just shy, it's 13mm, so just shy of 1.5 centimeters. And you want to press that in place, turning obviously your seam in towards the wrong side, like so. And you do that all around the outside edge, get it all nicely pressed in place. So I'm just going to measure that and press it. So I've just pressed it carefully with my finger and thumb, and now I can go all the way around it using these edges of my point turner. Very useful for pressing fabrics that you can't press with an iron point turners are. There's a nice pressed edge for you. So now, I'll show you in a moment, actually on my mannequin. When you go to attach your sleeve, you want to put this edge closest to the actual neck, because you're going to be sewing this edge to your sleeve. So I've actually rolled the edge up a bit more, just in order to get these two edges here to align. But you can see I've done it over the right side, and you can see from the seam edge here that that's the wrong side. So you want to align your bottom seam of your cuff with the under seam of your shoulder. Not your shoulder, your under shoulder. That's the main part that you're going to be aligning. And then you want to, with a fabric like this, it's quite difficult to get it to stay properly, but you will, if you can pin, by all means do pin everything in place so that you can make it easier for yourself when you stitch around. From here, now that we've got our cuff stitched to our sleeve, we turn it inside out, making sure to keep this turned up like this. So just gently pull it, straighten out your seam. You want the seam on the inside to be coming into the cuff, so you want it facing that way on the inside. If you're using a fabric that you can pin, this is the point where you can pin everything in place as well. So let's get that all turned in, sitting flush. And once you're happy with the placement of everything, you're going to stitch inside the seam here. So you're going to aim to put your needle exactly where your seam already is. That's what crack stitching or stitching in the ditch is. Now, don't get a little bit frustrated if you come off and your stitches are slightly visible, but do take it slowly. It's easier to stitch in the ditch if you take it slowly and take it a couple of stitches at a time. Reposition, another few stitches, reposition, and then you'll get the best finish as well along this edge. Final thing to do on these cuffs is just to fold them in half again, and we're just going to run short tacking stitches just at the underarm seam and the shoulder seam, just to keep it in place. The final thing that we have left to do now on our dress is our hem. So we're going to turn it up by 10mm first and press, and then we're going to turn it by a further 15mm and press, and that gives us a lovely flat double roll hem, and we're then going to top stitch all the way around the edge of that. And there we have the tea house dress from Sew House 7. I did find that The best stitch length, oddly enough, to use for sewing very tightly woven fabric like this silk seems to be about 2.2 millimeters. That's the shortest stitch on my machine, and I found that when I accidentally forgot to change my stitch length up to 3 millimeters like I was doing everywhere else, I got less rippling on the silk, presumably because it's not stretching pulling at the silk over such a distance as it would be with the 3 millimeter. So should I sew with this particular fabric again, I'll definitely bear that in mind. I've certainly got more than enough to make another dress if I wish to out of it. I'm really happy, even though there's a few tiny mistakes, but I'm really happy with it. I think it looks great and I'm quite excited to wear it. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and sewing your tea house dress as well. If you like this video, please do hit like, please subscribe. That's all for this video, and I will see you next time.